What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 35 of Convos on the Pedicab. I'm here with a very special guest, Professor, Navy diver, archaeologist, green builder, city council candidate, director of what is the Montopolis Community Development Corporation, intellectual dynamo, Fred McGhee. Before we get started, though, we got to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, 10th Planet Austin, 10 PATX. Get woke and improve your jiu-jitsu at the same time. You know, we have there's a lot of civil unrest going on around right now. There's no better time than now to learn how to intelligently defend yourself. We have a phenomenal jiu-jitsu program taught by the number 5th ranked grappler in the world, Kyle Baim, as well as the number 6th ranked grappler at 135, Gabe Tuttle. We have a great MMA and kickboxing program taught by former UFC fighter Andrew Craig, jiu-jitsu black belt and pro fighter Cody Hofstadter, and seasoned Muay Thai pro Chantal Perry. We also have a great strength and conditioning program taught by Isak the Viking Ninja. So if you're in Southeast Austin or if you're in the Austin area in general and you want to learn an essential skill both on the mats and in the streets, come to 10th Planet Austin, 10 PATX on both Twitter and Instagram. Anyway, Fred, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, it's good to be in your pedicab, man.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys are really aware of this, but Fred is probably one of the smartest, most well-educated people in the entire city of Austin. And I would even go so far to say he's probably one of the smartest people and most informed people that you've never heard of. So I wanted to get you on the cab so you can shed some light about a lot of the crazy shit that's been going on and clear up some misinfo and disinfo and all of that stuff. You know, a lot of tech companies are silencing people for spreading whatever misinformation, or they're silencing a narrative that they don't necessarily want to hear. And Joe Rogan said this, and I'm going to repeat it. And I think that the best way to correct misinformation is not by silencing it, but by truth talk and explaining what's happening. And that's why I wanted to have you on, so we can explain a lot of what's going on and put certain things in perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I'm cool.
So anyway, how did you get started in politics, and how did all this stuff happen for you? Before, just to segue into all this.
Well, that's a long story.
Right.
Without sort of revealing too much about myself, I first came to Austin in 1993 when I was still in the Navy. When I was a special operations officer, U.S. Navy diver, 1140 designator. But I was stationed in South Texas when Naval Station Ingleside was still open. So I stayed at Bergstrom Air Force Base in the BOQ, but I had to go down there for a couple of years. And then in 95, after I finished my service, I started graduate school at UT Austin to become a maritime archaeologist. And did that. UT wasn't known for its underwater archaeology program, but I had the underwater piece covered.
All right.
I didn't need diving skills. I wanted to get some archaeological skills. What politicized me was in 1996, I became involved in Houston at a public housing project called Allen Parkway Village. Because during the demolition of that housing project and the construction of the new units, similar to what's been happening in Austin of late, they uncovered a cemetery.
Wait, what?
A cemetery that people told them was there, and they denied existed.
So, wait, they built a cemetery? They built a housing project over a cemetery?
Oh yeah. This is not unusual. We've since learned that is actually quite common. Remember, public housing was constructed primarily to segregate African Americans. Okay? So these housing projects were built in locations in cities around the United States that were not considered high-dollar real estate. They were places that ruling whites deemed as suitable for black people to live, primarily because the real estate valuations were so low, meaning the land was cheap. The land was cheap to buy. Let's build it, put a bunch of blacks in it. So, this is true of Iberville In New Orleans, there's a housing project in Tampa where this applied. Houston wasn't alone. So this was a thorny and interesting issue for archaeology. And I wanted to involve myself because I have a personal public housing background. As a young boy in Germany, I lived in public housing in Enfield, Connecticut, where I eventually migrated to as an immigrant. I lived in some Section 8 housing. So it was an issue that had a particular interest to me, as part of also a general conception of growing up poor on the downside of advantage. I wanted to do something that was meaningful and helpful, but that would also, work within my graduate program at the time. And it was through that advocacy, working with the resident council at Allen Parkway Village, I contacted both the archaeological firm that the housing authority had contracted to dig up these burials. But then, because I had also worked for the Austin Housing Authority earlier that year, I knew to contact the resident council of that housing project and speak with its president, Lenwood Johnson.
Okay.
And I eventually placed myself in his and their service, Lenwood Johnson, Wesley Cyrus, and others. And it became a very personally fulfilling thing to do this in collaboration with these people. And that's really what got, I think, the bug started. I'm not a political, quote-unquote, person. I was in graduate school more or less at the time to get a PhD, to embark on a career in academia, and to do research and teaching.
Yeah, and I think I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I wound up getting involved kind of accidentally.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have even ran for city council if our city wasn't colossally fucking things up with this whole pandemic. And if I didn't feel as though like my livelihood was being directly threatened by what everybody was doing.
Right.
So I understand that completely. And I think that ultimately you want politicians who don't want to be politicians.
Well, electoral politics is a different beast. There's a lot of ways to be political. I eventually ran for the city council because I felt I had something to offer.
Yeah.
I wanted to place myself, and I am European, in many ways. In places such as the United Kingdom and in other parliamentary systems, you stand. Here in the U.S., we run. And there is a difference.
What do you mean? Oh, you're okay.
Yeah.
Like running for office.
Right. In the U.K., it's famous to say, I'm standing for election, to a parliamentary seat from place X, okay? In the United States, we have elections that last forever, especially the higher you go. They're tremendously expensive. There's a really annoying role played by the media and other gatekeepers. So in the U.S., there's a different tradition of running for office and actually going out there and having to hustle for it. And that's kind of been a downfall for me because hustling in our system means asking rich people for money, by and large. Or the alternative, trying to organize people who you would like to think you would represent.
Yeah.
And that's also a challenge.
So it's like you're either asking rich people for lots of money, or like a small group of rich people for lots of money, or you're asking a ton of poor people for money and that you don't even know that they could afford to give you.
That's right. It's a rigged system. But I wanted, it's one of those bucket list things. I ran 3 times. I ran first for the school board in 2007, lost to Sam Guzman, who eventually got the District 2 seat. He was eventually replaced by Jamie Mathias on the Austin School Board.
I know who that guy is, yeah. He's the gay dude, right?
The gay former priest, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, who stepped down and has now been replaced by Ofelia Zapata, who I also know.
Okay.
Because we worked, I worked as a volunteer for Austin Interfaith at San Jose Church in the late 1990s when she and her son were working with Austin Interfaith. So, and there's more to that story, but I'm not going to relate it here. But I know who she is, and hopefully she hasn't forgotten me. And then I ran for the ACC board in 2010. I was an adjunct professor at ACC at the time. But I was a Democratic Party operative as well. I was president of Black Austin Democrats. And
you were?
A precinct chair, helped Obama get elected, worked very hard to do that. So, I was somebody who was, in the electoral sense involved. But, I am now very much a reformed ex-politician in the electoral sense, and I focus my energies mostly on community service. And my service is mostly focused on Montopolis, where I live and work, and East Austin more generally.
Yeah, and there was some like weird zoning stuff, right, that happened to you. I didn't really know too much about it, but there was a certain area that was they were trying to like zone it a certain way, and you were really opposed to it. And then like you had like Austin Sanders and all these like hacks at the Chronicle that were like accusing you of like NIMBYism or something.
These guys are clowns.
Yeah.
They don't want, the fact that you reached out to me and they won't says it all. Yeah. They don't want to talk to me because they have their religion. They have their false god that they worship.
Who's the false god?
It's new urbanism. It's kind of like the Scientology of out-of-work tech workers, and mediocre journalists. It's funny. They claim to be actually engaging in an anti-racist politics, which is even more funny.
Because everything that they're doing is pushing black people out of their neighborhoods.
It's it's anti-racist racism. Okay, they can't actually bear somebody like me, who's been at this shit for 25 years, correcting every single thing that they were taught. Okay, they can't. And I'm not just a guy who knows this shit from books. I live this shit.
Yeah.
I've lived it. I've experienced it. I'm the guy. I'm somebody who's in there deep in the woods, and so I usually, if we get into a beef on social media or something, which doesn't really happen much anymore, I'm just like, look, let's meet, let's talk, and not once, not one time, not one time.
Not one time does anybody want to talk.
Never met Austin Sanders. For a while there, what was that dude's name? I can't.
Michael King?
No.
That guy blocked me on Twitter.
Oh, I know Michael King. I know but what was the other guy? The guy with the black hair. I can't remember his name right now. He was like vocal for a while. He has a blog.
Hey, did you ever watch? Do you watch Cobra Kai at all on YouTube?
I started watching the first episode.
Oh, do you know Dimitri on Cobra Kai?
No.
Like Hawk's like nerdy friend. Dimitri.
Oh yeah.
Dude, that's Austin Sanders.
Really?
Yeah, no. I mean, I feel like that is like who Austin, like that is like.
That's funny. That's quite funny. But yeah, zoning politics are the bread and butter of municipal politics. And, I've been working hard to defend my community from speculative real estate development, which in our system is supposed to be understood as a good thing. These out of town, out of our neighborhood people think that, that they're bringing something that is in our interest to our community.
No, they don't. They just
and when we challenge them, they become perturbed.
Fred, I'm gonna say that I actually don't think that they are doing anything in your best interest.
No.
They just like to say certain progressive policies, and they use identity politics and fake social justice in order to push an agenda that's going to make them money.
More or less. I mean, there's details and nuance, when you actually get into the weeds of these kinds of things. You start talking about the ins and outs of what zoning politics entails. But more or less, that is what they're saying. This city has institutionalized this neoliberal philosophy that we must build maximum number of units, and then we will use an economic concept called value capture to try to get some affordability. Okay. The problem is that the communities never actually get a seat at the table. We don't get to bargain based upon the fact that we're the ones who live in these neighborhoods in the first place. And I mean, this is completely based on the fact that we are politically, relatively speaking, disempowered.
Yeah.
I mean, do these developers go to Northwest Hills or to Pemberton Heights and peddle, 3-acre multifamily projects that will produce 300 plus units?
Well, but they're doing the homeless. But like the way you're feeling right now is the way like a lot of people in those neighborhoods are starting to feel about the homeless stuff.
Well, the homeless aren't in their communities.
No, but there's a lot of the homeless backlash I've noticed from being on certain forums and talking to certain people is from people in those areas.
Well, there is an element of elitism there. These people are not confronted on a 24-hour basis with homelessness. In Montopolis, we've always dealt with homelessness, okay? We have a disproportionate share of homeless people in our community for all kinds of reasons. We were for a long time the place of last resort for many homeless people. Remember, our community is known as Poverty Island. We're the poorest part of the city. So homelessness for us isn't something, it isn't one of those things you see them on your drive to work or whatever. We have them 24/7 in our community. They are there all the time. I think for them, it's a different thing because at 3 a.m, they're not confronted with a homeless camp of 50 people, smack dab in the middle of their community, okay, as opposed to us who are, But we recognize the essential humanity of the homeless, For instance, at the Burditt's Prairie Cemetery, which is a cemetery that I manage, we've had homeless people staying at our cemetery before. Okay, if you go to that cemetery, you'll actually still be able to see evidence of homeless camps that were once there. Okay, and we told people that, like, look, we're aware that they're there, and we let them know, look, don't disturb anything. Okay. And I felt that was the best compromise, as opposed to being hardcore and, calling the police in. And other people have called the police without our authorization and without speaking to us, because this cemetery actually is private property. But that gives you some idea. You always have to have an ear on the ground about how people actually perceive and act.
So my take on homelessness is that I think that the city, with what the city did, I think that they're kind of enabling vagrancy, and there is probably some kind of financial motive for how they're enabling vagrancy by just letting this be like a camping free-for-all. But I also don't think you should criminalize homeless people, and there should be certain areas where it's cool for homeless people to camp. And I think a cemetery is probably one of those areas where it's not going to be too bad, in terms of the environment. You're not gonna see homeless people harassing tourists, while they're in a big commercial district. A cemetery seems like not such a bad place, or even under a bridge doesn't seem like it's that bad, because it's kind of you're letting people, live their lives, but you're not letting something like that potentially mess with the environment or interfere with other people living their lives. Does that make sense?
Well, when you're homeless, you go where you can.
You go, yeah.
Okay, and that means where there's, where you're not under threat of being removed by the police,
but I think a cemetery
security.
Wouldn't be a problem. I feel like letting people camp on or near a cemetery seems like it's pretty fair. It seems like a pretty fair middle ground to go to a cemetery.
No,
you don't think so?
No, you want people in a home. Okay, I believe housing is a human right, just like healthcare and education. Okay, we have to be very clear. Our housing crisis in this city is not an accident. It was created. It was created primarily by our city council starting in the late 1990s, when they embraced neoliberal policies of the destruction of East Austin, which is where most of the housing affordability was. Okay, we've documented this. I've documented it. Okay, the American Community Survey, the Census Bureau has documented we've lost well over 100,000 low-income units, almost all of which have been replaced by bourgeois housing, condos for tech workers, that those people who were living in those homes previously have no reasonable expectation of being able to afford. So we created this. We ethnically cleansed East Austin,
yeah.
And we got rid of the affordable housing, and then we're wondering why people are homeless and stressed.
Well, and you're also raising the property taxes on lower and middle class homeowners in those areas.
In addition to that, yes.
Yes. But then there's also the fact that when you enable urban camping and do stuff like that, you're getting homeless people from other parts of the country and other parts of the state that start flocking to Austin, and you don't want this to be a destination city for that type of stuff. So there's got to be some kind of a balance. That's what I'm saying. There's got to be a balance for how to address that.
Oh, I would not have voted to repeal the ordinance. Okay,
yeah.
That was not well thought out. But it has become the Achilles heel of the new urbanist mindset, the new urbanist mentality. These people don't think in terms of consequences, okay? Environmental consequences, justice consequences. They don't. They only see what the rhetoric that they're surrounded by, which is peddled by the real estate developers seeking the zoning entitlement increases.
Yeah,
and most of them do not have a critical eye. The person who represents me, for instance, my city councilor,
P.O.
is lazy, naive, and gullible, which is why he's in that position. Okay?
Well, yeah, he seems like he's probably a very nice guy to talk to, but yeah, he's just doesn't really seem like he thinks he's not.
No, he's not. He's not a very intelligent man, and he knows that. Okay, without his wife, he'd be lost. She's the one who actually runs the office. She calls herself the First Lady of District 3.
Really? I did not know that.
They're quite a pair. It's kind of funny, But, unfortunately, it isn't funny if you're homeless or poor, because what he has done is made life miserable for a huge percentage of the people he claims to represent. District 3 is the poorest city council district out of all 10 districts.
What I thought 2 was up there also. I thought 2 was up there.
2's up there, but not as poor as District 3. Yeah, the poorest city council districts are Districts 3, 4, and 2. Okay, remember, there's a good chunk of District 2 that's not poor. Okay.
Yeah,
But District 3 has peculiar characteristics. Now, these are changing, these characteristics. Not because we fixed poverty, but because we've kicked out the poor and are replacing them, with shit like the domain at Riverside.
But which PO approved of?
Of course, because a neoliberal doesn't believe in actually lifting the poor up, in spite of the rhetoric. They want to get rid of them, so that when you look at shit in a GIS or in a spreadsheet, poverty has decreased. They'll say poverty decreased, because they know most people won't ask, well, how did that happen?
Well, it's like
did you move the poor out, kick them out? Did you cleanse them? Or did you move in a bunch of rich people who now skew the statistics?
Well, it's also like college athletes. Like now universities are talking about how their graduation rates have improved, but that's because all the guys are getting general studies degrees.
Well, we have a no-kill shelter. Okay, really? We have a no-kill shelter? I mean, anybody with a brain knows these things are laughable. Okay, the municipal league or various league of city. I mean, and they get awards for this nonsense. We now live in a world where facts aren't facts, and if reality doesn't comport with the facts, you change the statistics. In other words, what it boils down to is a complete breaking down in systems of accountability, and everybody's doing it. This is not a Democratic or Republican problem. It's a problem across the board with municipal governance. A lack of accountability. People who come in and are like, I will be accountable. And people who are prepared to fall on their sword if things empirically screw
Fail.
up. Yeah.
Like our mayor is not prepared to fall on his sword.
None of them are.
No, none.
He's a neoliberal.
No.
I mean, look, these people think in terms of better or worse, not good or bad. Everything in their mindset is better or worse. When you have a mentality like that, however, what it does is it doesn't furnish you with a proper moral compass. Okay? If there's no such thing ever as success or failure, only better or worse, well, then you just become an engineer. You become an engineer of the public mind and of public policy. Okay? And what happens is when you institutionalize that governance is that people become easier to manipulate when there's no right or wrong.
Well, people also become easier to manipulate when they don't own something.
When they don't own something?
Yeah, when you don't own something, and when you don't own anything, when you don't have anything that's yours, you're a lot less likely to be involved in what's going on because you don't have as much skin in the game.
Well, there's a degree. I would say that's true. I think there's also a great deal of freedom in not having possessions. I don't want to sound like Gandhi here, but not having possessions gives you the ability, especially if you become political, to really start doing some interesting things.
Because you don't care.
Well, what do you have to lose? Okay, this was a cornerstone of Satyagraha, Mahatma Gandhi's, Mohandas Gandhi's approach to political activism, is to minimize your possessions and to engage in personal conduct that is so exemplary that people, when they look at you, will literally think you're glowing.
Yeah, no, I get that because I do feel as though the way I conduct myself has definitely changed over the past 9 to 10 months, and I could just tell in terms of my interactions with other people and the energy I present. But if you don't own anything, there's a flaw to that, and it's that if you don't own anything, it's hard to relate to a lot of the people that you're trying to talk to because then you're on a different you're not as empathetic because you're not going through the same thing.
No, I don't think that's true. I'm with Gandhi on that. We don't have a shortage in America of people not owning shit. We have a small segment of the population over-owning so much shit at the expense of everybody else. We have a pizza that has 100 slices. We have one guy who gets 99 slices, and then everybody else fights for that one slice. Okay? And that's inequality in a nutshell. And that's the problem, inequality.
Well, this pandemic exacerbated it tremendously.
Oh, very much so. Pandemics reflect the existing state of social economic affairs. So when we have the next environmental catastrophe, floods and other sorts of things, the same thing will happen. And it's only going to get worse at the present rate unless we stop this accelerating rate of inequality and the proletarianization of the middle class. We're going to be in for some hurt. A lot of the anxiety in the country, I think, is reflective of the fact that people are no longer believing in the American dream. They are, and I speak here as an immigrant. They believe that, and they don't just believe based upon some sort of weird ideology. They think they have gotten a raw deal.
People have, but at the same time, though, people haven't been. Our education system is so bad, and the stuff that people teach in the schools, we're not really teaching people how to maximize the opportunity that living in America will present.
Well, that launches a huge discussion. Public education in America is not as good as it could be. I'm an educator.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a whole range of reasons for why that is. As a black man, I can tell you that public education has never served black people. And you have to be an exceptional person to rise above that. And that's unfortunate. It's sad. It's not, but that's part of inequality more generally. When it comes to education, look and see how rich people educate their children. Okay?
Well, yeah. I mean, I used to sub in AISD. I know there's a difference.
Well, that's public education. I'm talking about rich people.
Like the private schools, yeah.
Yeah. Look at what they do in terms of how they educate their children. Okay? And then look at what comes out of their mouth when it comes to discussions about public education.
So I'm gonna push back on you because I grew up in New York, right? And I had a lot of I went to a charter school and went to public school before that, right? But I had a lot of friends that went to the Trinities and the Horace Manns and the elite Ivy League type $40,000 a year private school. I had friends who went to those schools, and there's another side of that, and a lot of these parents don't educate their kids at all because they're fucking absent. They're working all the time. The kids are raised by nannies. Some of those kids who go to those private schools are like the dumbest motherfuckers on the planet, Fred.
Yeah, well, they're privileged.
But they're idiots. They are idiots.
Well, they don't have to deal with the same consequences that somebody who grows up in a family of lesser means has to deal with, okay? I don't want to stereotype because, look, I went to public education in Enfield, Connecticut. And, I knew people who went to places like Deerfield Academy, places in western New England where there's a lot of prep schools that are internationally known and respected. A lot of those kids were cool. They wore nicer clothes. They didn't have to scrounge for food the way I had to. They didn't have to deal with my horrible family life, cops and social workers constantly at the house and whatnot. But, as I've grown older, I've grown to appreciate the challenges of growing up with means. I don't want to be the type of class-based warrior, if you want to use that word, who tries to stereotype rich people. I do believe, and I say to their face, I'm coming for your money because ethically you have way too much fucking money, okay? But I don't try to personalize it because if they have enough self-awareness, they're aware that they're relatively privileged and they're seeking, in many cases, opportunities to try to do better, okay? And you have to give them a meaningful outlet for that.
Yeah. Do you think Bill Gates is one of those people?
In his own mind, probably. But, when I look at the Gates Foundation, it's still a top-down foundation based upon his definitions of what he thinks will work for the poor, okay? I say to people, to funders all the time, I don't want your fucking charity. I want your respect, okay? I represent a high poverty community, okay? But I obviously outgrew, in many ways, my poverty mentality, mainly through my own personal effort, but also because I was able to tap systems of assistance along the way. Public ones. Let me make this point.
My bad, I'm sorry.
Let me make this point, okay? So when funders come to our community and are like, we want to help, I'm like, great. Here's how you can help. Now, if they start to steer what we define as what will be in our own best interest and what will most help us in the direction of shit that they want to do, well, they can go take a hike because it is not their place. What it boils down to is this: shut up and give us the money and go away. That's it. We'll take care of it. We'll handle it. We have the capacity to do that. We have the ability to do that. We have the brains and brawn to solve our own problems. And for me, that is the big tragedy of nonprofitism writ large, is that it's not for the people they claim to be serving. It's not about them.
Can you explain that a little more? Because there is like a whole nonprofit industrial complex.
There certainly is in Austin, yes.
And I never really understood how to like fully explain it. And you being involved, I think it would be good for you to like explain like how that actually works and how do these nonprofits use social justice in the guise of like helping, reduce income inequality to line their pockets. Like how does that actually work?
Well,
to like the average layman, like how does that?
Its ultimate function is to legitimate an unjust system of exploitation. Okay. It is understood that neoliberal economic policies produce and deepen misery, okay, worsen inequality, the consequences of this. This is the fundamental difference between a liberal and a conservative in terms of politics. A conservative basically is like, fuck the poor, okay? They're poor, it's probably their fault. Fuck them, okay? A liberal is like, okay, yeah, fuck them, but we got to do something about it. They acknowledge that the problem exists. And the place that they, over time, have looked to try to do something about it, okay, is not via government, which is what a traditional liberal would do, like during the New Deal. Remember, our Constitution says that it is the job of government to promote the general welfare. That would mean, to me, healthcare, education, housing, things like that. It's government's job, not the nonprofit's job. The private sector's job is to make money. Now, neoliberalism is neoliberalism because it acknowledges the traditional liberal notion that inequality is produced by the private sector, but it sets up this nonprofit world to try to address something about it, to do something about it. But all it does is legitimate an unjust system from the word go, okay? So that's why with nonprofits, when you look at what their behavior is, and when you take a look at how they act, they, in the housing arena, for instance, in Austin, they don't support communities who want to build their own housing, okay? Because you have to kiss the ring, because who's paying for it ultimately? The private sector, and the people that they've bought and paid for and have placed in office, city councils.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the role of the nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector is to legitimate a system that is inherently unjust, okay? There is some diversity there. There are some nonprofits who understand that their job is to work themselves out of a job. Because remember, the idea is that charity exists, but it shouldn't exist in perpetuity. You should ultimately
You work yourself out of existence.
That's right.
Yeah.
Work yourself out, but that's not the point anymore. Most of these nonprofits now have adopted a growth mentality that comes from the private sector. Okay, so
and they need more funding
absolutely
to keep going. So it's like, let me appeal to the Bezoses and the Gateses and all these stuff. Yeah,
There you go. So nonprofits now believe that they have to grow like a private corporation would.
And then they can only grow if people are more. If inequality, the worse inequality gets, the more these nonprofits go. Because look, it's like a big snowball effect. Like we gotta. It's like now we need more money because look how much worse things are. We need more money.
It's fundamentally similar to the prison industrial complex. Okay, we have private prisons, which means if you think about it, it's a good thing that people are in prison. Think about it. If you privatize prisons, these companies, which are for-profit companies, need people in prison. Yeah. Okay. Now, do we as a society think it's a good thing to have 2-3 million people in prison? Well, if you're, I think, a reasonable person, you would argue that that's probably not a good thing.
No, but if you have 10,000 shares of the Geo Group, then you have a different.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're a shareholder of a private, prison company, Corrections Corporation of America, or any of these other, corporations, then absolutely you want surveillance. You want a toughening up. You want more customers. You want more people thrown in jail. Okay. The defense industry is similar in nature, okay? You want war. The United States is the biggest weapons dealer on earth, in addition to having the largest prison population on earth, okay? These things are all connected.
How do you feel about the lockdowns?
Well,
we had a little argument about this a while ago.
I'm not an epidemiologist. A lot of this you have to take on faith. I am an anthropologist. And an anthropologist who is worth her salt will historicize and internationalize, okay? So let's take a look at other pandemics, the history of other pandemics, the flu pandemic, cholera, malaria, other sorts of things. How were those handled, and who was impacted the most? And then to internationalize. How are they dealing with this in places like Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, Australia? Okay,
Well,
including places that the United States has deemed evil. Okay,
well, Australia is not deemed evil.
no, but it's a good example of a country that you could use as a frame of reference. Okay, generally speaking, a country like New Zealand, an island country, is seen as one of the better countries to have responded to this pandemic.
Taiwan was pretty good too.
Taiwan, another island country, Australia, an island continent. They got ahead of it. They had a progressive public policy, and they are now reaping the rewards.
So, sort of, yeah. I know that I don't think they locked down or did anything in Taiwan, right? Taiwan never had to do any kind of like shutdowns. They just had like a good contact tracing. They knew about the virus. They like had testing. They just had their shit in order from the jump.
Well, they have a shit ton of public housing, and they have a tradition of mask wearing, and they have health care, okay, and they have an aggressive government. China is the same way. Mainland China,
yeah,
Hong Kong.
But you don't want to be China.
Why not?
Because they were bolting people's doors shut and not letting people leave their homes. I was watching videos of that. People are getting social credit score. They're like the biggest polluters on planet Earth. When the virus first came out, they were like literally silencing doctors. When the virus came out, they lied to the WHO. Like there's a laundry list of like why you.
Alex, they're just ahead of the curve.
I don't want to be ahead that way.
Well, you're an American.
Yeah,
you're an American. China is an ancient country. Okay, what's funny is that they got the United States to bring all of its manufacturing and money, and for the United States to indebt itself to China. They basically have gotten everything they wanted. Okay. And now in the United States, because of our own ineptitude and stupidity, all the Chinese have to do is just sit back, lay back, and watch this shit happen. It's a masterstroke, quite frankly, on the part of the Chinese authorities. Look, in terms of individual liberties, without question, there are issues in China with human rights and other sorts of things. Make no mistake about that.
The Uyghurs,
okay? The United States pretends to have these kinds of liberties. We are now painfully finding out how much bullshit it all was.
Yeah, I mean, here's what my take on the pandemic is, right? And it's made me it's pointed out what's amazing and what's horrible about America at the same time. And I think that you watch videos in other countries where people were getting like arrested, they were getting their asses beat by police, they were getting fined thousands of dollars with all the mass surveillance because they were like past a kilometer of their house or whatever the lockdown laws were. And you see videos like that and you say, man, I'm really happy and I'm really blessed that I live in the United States because we don't have to deal with.
Where are we seeing this?
I was watching it like all over social media where I was just throughout the whole pandemic, I was watching videos where people and reading articles about how people were getting fined like tens of thousands of dollars. There was an article, I read some news article, and I'll try to find it, but I was reading articles like in Australia, like if you were past a kilometer from your house during the lockdowns, you got fined like thousands of dollars or something like that. So I mean,
well, yeah, that's what it takes. I mean,
But the fact that we didn't do that here kind of made me appreciate living here more.
Why? Look at the results. Hundreds of thousands of people, infected, like 200,000+ dead.
Yeah, but if you also look at the CDC data, just to push back, wasn't it like 9% or 6% or something of the people who died from this? No, 94% of the people who died from this virus or got seriously ill had like severe comorbidities. So I think that ultimately, when you start figuring this out, you got to start pushing for a healthier life.
Don't go down that road. I urge you to not go down that road. Okay, it is unethical to do so. Those people did not need to die. Okay, and there are real families who've lost loved ones as a result of the stupidity of this government, the ineptitude of this government. It's a tragedy. because it didn't have to happen. And it didn't happen in countries that took this virus seriously from the first and were responsible.
So I actually agree with you. And I think that if our president were to kind of listen to his health experts and paid more attention to what was happening in China in December and January, we would have had testing available in March. We would have had a bunch of PPE.
Yes.
We would have had a plan to stay open while being safe at the same time.
That wouldn't have been a plan. There could have been leadership on the part of the federal government. I completely agree with you there. But it is important for you to understand the primary reason why this country has not been able to respond to this pandemic properly is because we have a healthcare system geared for profits, not for humanity. That's the main reason why. Everything else is just conversation. This country is not prepared for national scale pandemics of any kind. Look at Katrina. The evidence is overwhelming. I could cite you a bunch of other examples. We have a system that is not geared to help people, period. It's every person for themselves. And until we fix that, it's just going to be tinkering at the edges. Let's see what happens with this new president. I don't think things will fundamentally change because he said things wouldn't fundamentally change, especially on this issue.
Although maybe it's going to be different now that it's all Democrats in the House and the Senate, and maybe because of he said this pre-pandemic too.
Well,
hold on, I'm going to put a sweater on.
Oh, you're getting cold?
Yeah,
Okay.
keep talking about it.
Yeah. You want me to keep talking?
Yeah.
Okay. Blah 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 blah. I mean, look. You do the best you can. I mean, I'm trying to protect my family as best as I can. I think most people reasonably are doing the same thing. It's difficult to watch what's been happening. And I mean, I don't use social media as my guide for information. And I don't really pay much attention to mainstream media like CNN or even the New York Times. I mean, I read some of that stuff, but I always try to, as an anthropologist, like I said, historicize and internationalize. So I'll read Frankfurter Allgemeine. I will read, Le Monde. I will read La Prensa. I will read things in multiple languages from most of the world to try to see how they're covering and understanding these things, because you always have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to become brainwashed.
I agree with you, and I think that when you do these lockdowns and you force people in their house and all they do is watch and all they do is listening to corporate media and going on Facebook and Twitter, and because that's how most people are spending their time, it's literally creating an environment for radicalization.
Well, we saw that with this thing that happened in Washington, D.C. last week. And that is a complicated situation. But yeah, social media, without question, stoked those flames.
Yeah,
I think I don't think anybody could argue otherwise.
But it also stoked the flames too when you're telling people that they can't work and you're not offering people just compensation for having to stay home and not operate their business. Like, that's kind of a human rights violation when you tell someone that they can't operate their small business without giving them or their business just comp. Like in Europe, when they did shutdowns, they paid the businesses.
That's right.
You're not paying, if you don't pay small business owners to stay home, what do you expect to happen?
That's right.
And then I
agree with you completely.
Yeah, and then and honestly, I don't think we should have closed restaurants. I think that if you're going to have like Amazon and Target and all these big retail chains stay open, I think being at a restaurant is probably safer, honestly, than being at a Walmart.
You know who did a good job with this? Costco. I'm touting Costco, but
Costco.
Costco,
Okay.
man. Costco. A lot of Americans buy stuff at Costco, and Costco, as a private corporation, exercised, I think, in an American context, significant leadership on this pandemic business. They got their employees on board. They told their customers what they were going to do. When they had lines, you had to get, I mean, the only thing they aren't doing in most of their locations is testing people when they walk in. But they have gotten religion about sanitizing, about mask wearing, about social distancing, and they are enforcing it.
Yeah, and almost every restaurant in Austin is doing the same thing.
Yeah, well,
And,
they are now.
They are.
They are now.
No, even in the beginning, the first month, there were a few people that weren't behaving very well. But for the most part, a lot of people were taking the correct precautions. And I'm not even sure what the actual COVID case rate is in a restaurant where you sit down. And I think that if you just had the bars just operate as restaurants, and you just compensated them accordingly. So, because you're going to lose revenue if you structure your bar like a restaurant and you only do table service, you will lose revenue. I think if you offer some kind of compensation package to make up for the difference, or some kind of tax break, like, you could have definitely had people look out for each other a lot.
We had a bill passed. We had money put out there. Who got the fucking money, Alex? Was it the people you're talking about?
No.
Okay, that's the problem.
What I'm saying. Like,
that's the problem.
Yeah, we did.
It has nothing to do with following the protocols and shit like that. That's not the issue. The fact is that the money that was put out there, okay, to assist people was doled out in a bunch of fucking lawyers got it, law firms got it, car dealerships. Everybody but the fucking people, who you're talking about, small business people who run restaurants and bars. They got fucked.
Yeah. And so you can't really blame a lot of those people for wanting to go to the Capitol. I guarantee there's a lot of people who were like,
it's not a question of blame. They still should have social distanced and done all the things that they should have done, and many of them did. Many of them did not. What I'm trying to tell you is don't be angry about the protocols. Those protocols are public health official, certified. They're the things we should be doing at a minimum, okay? Social, all that shit that they're talking about, okay? Be angry about the fact that the government of this country is fucked in the head. It can't do vaccinations right. It can't do anything right. It's fucking it up. Even, if you're an anti-vaxxer now, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but you'd be a fool, okay, to not be aware and see. Now we have an environment where people who are even anti-vaxxers are like, yeah, I need the vaccine.
What?
The fucking government can't even do
that
that
shit
shit right.
Are you going to get the COVID vaccine?
Not yet.
But do you have like any health stuff where you're like predisposed to getting sick?
Nothing major. I mean, nothing that would cause me to not get the vaccine or to have my family take the vaccine.
I offered to wear a mask. I literally was like, hey man, I'll wear a mask if you want. You know what I mean? Like I said I'll wear a mask. I like offered to do it out of consideration and stuff.
It's consequences and accountability. The anti-vaxxers are not wrong. Some of them who have this point of view, in pointing out that in a healthcare system for profit, where we have vaccine schedules that have 22, 24 vaccines on them, okay, where this shit is being done because some pharmaceutical company wants to make more money, that those are, and that they're able to do this shit without any accountability whatsoever for the consequences. That's a problem. Okay?
Yeah, exactly. You're right. I'm glad you said that, because that's how I feel, and I think that when I say stuff like that, people will label me as someone who's like an anti-vaxxer. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Notice that that's not a scientific argument. You're not arguing the efficacy of the vaccine or whether you should take it. What we're talking about, again, is the delivery mechanism, corruption, lack of accountability, lack of proper study of the consequences. These are, you can't get around this. It's an iron cage that these people can't get out of, because the only answer, if you're honest about it, is to go in a different direction, a more progressive political direction.
You know that you can't sue a vaccine manufacturer if like you get an injury from a vaccine?
Oh, I mean, you have the vaccine court and shit like that, But, these are problems that they're going to have. I mean, and this is something that is going to have to be addressed. I mean, I don't know. It's a huge discussion that we probably can't have now. But, it all leads back to the same place. When I said all this shit is connected, just follow the money. Follow the money, and it will reveal all. Really is what the bottom line is. You have to remove the element of profit and money from basic human rights.
Okay, and I agree. But then a lot of these like fake progressive DSA people, especially like specifically in Austin, well, not specifically, but just in Austin because we're in Austin, they're like, it seems like they were the ones that were pushing the hardest for like people to stay home without any like regard for small businesses or service industry people, and they seem like they're the ones who are like pushing the hardest for mandatory vaccinations and stuff.
And I have a problem with that as well. They too are enmeshed in this thinking of not properly analyzing consequences. When you sort of self-righteously declare that everybody should do X, Y, or Z without a proper assessment of the consequences, in this case, economic consequences, psychological consequences, and so forth and so on, that too isn't correct. DSA is supposed to be progressive. They're supposed to, believe in socialism. It's in their name. But the Austin chapter in particular isn't. They are in bed with big real estate in this town. I know because I have worked with these people. I was a member of DSA. I dabbled with DSA years ago, decades ago, as well as with the New Party, a party that briefly existed in New York and worked with and did New York-style fusion politics. Many of those people now are part of the Working Families Party, which exists in New York. So I'm not somebody who's new to these types of progressive politics. I think DSA, most people should have just kind of soberly assessed the situation. And a lot of people are voting with their feet now. In a city like Austin, which is a relatively youthful city, people are just doing what they do, and we've sort of entered into this pandemic behavior by default, which isn't necessarily the way I would have wanted it to happen, but nonetheless, it's the way it is. The whole thing has just been mismanaged from the word go. I think Trump in particular could have set a national tone that was calm. It would have been good for this, I think, actually, in an interesting way, because he was a competent neoliberal. I say this as both criticism and praise, is Barack Obama. No drama Obama. He would have gone in there, he would have maintained calm. He would have been like, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. We're going to help people. We're going to do this. And people would have responded.
Yeah, I think he has a better style of leadership maybe, but also, I read a Wall Street Journal article about how the Obama administration completely fucked up the whole swine flu thing. And the only reason things didn't get catastrophically bad is because of luck.
I didn't read that. And, the Wall Street Journal, isn't a friend of Mr. Obama's. I'm sure they have their own, there are limitations. The fact that we have a system of for-profit healthcare would have made Obama would have made it very difficult for him to do things. I'm speaking here in terms of temper and tone. Okay, I think a lot of lives would have been saved by that type of leadership. But ultimately, I still would have harbored the same critique, the same criticism that I have of Mr. Trump and these other people, which is that we need to get rid of our system of for-profit healthcare and replace it with something that is robust and that can handle national pandemics, because they clearly are going to happen again, and we should be learning lessons from what we're experiencing now. Well, the problem is that everybody's in panic mode. They're running around like chickens. And that, that's not going to fix. That's not good.
When our mayor is taking a private jet to Cabo in the middle of this, while he's telling people to stay home, shutting down small businesses, and you're literally taking a private jet, which is like one of the biggest exacerbators of climate change, and you're in a pandemic. It and then when like Gavin Newsom is showing up maskless at a restaurant, telling people to stay home, it's like these people are making the problem a lot worse when they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's the truth. You're making it a lot worse.
There's nothing I can say. There's no need for me to comment about that. A lot of people have commented about it. But if you sort of harbor the sentiments that I've previously expressed about how rich people behave and how they think, this isn't going to come as a surprise to you. Okay.
Well, not all rich people. But the rich people that do it gets publicized. You know what I mean? So it's just...
Rich people will be rich people. When the shit hits the fan, even people who are rich, who you think are your friends, trust me, they're going to act like rich people. Okay? It's just the way it is. The answer is to, again, bring people together. Have a society that's more humane and just. It isn't ethical. It isn't moral for these disproportionalities to exist, where a few get to have so much at the expense of the many. People have a right to life. People have a right to a certain quality of life. At the municipal level, that's the function of municipal government, to ensure a minimum quality of life for all people. We don't have a city like that in this city anymore.
And another thing too, man, is that it sounds really callous to say this, but this pandemic was at least right now, this has literally been the biggest money-making opportunity of our lifetimes if we knew what to do. If you were buying stock and you were buying Bitcoin and you were buying things in March and early April, you'd be you could literally have completely reversed your position in life if you did that.
Oh, without question. I mean, the stock market has gone through the roof. For all kinds of reasons. I mean, Bitcoin, it's hard to fuck up even Bitcoin, which, is cryptocurrency. It doesn't really exist. You can't go to 7-Eleven and buy shit with Bitcoin.
But you can buy at certain, like Central Texas Gunworks in certain areas.
But that's like fringe shit. Nobody, there's.
And I think that with the way, certain bank accounts are starting, like with the whole cancel culture and the fact that like social media and like certain like are canceling certain people for thinking differently, and like the fact that like Parler and like certain other alternative platforms aren't being used on like certain web, like Amazon's not allowing the website like. Or Google isn't allowing people to host like Parler, or the fact that like certain people aren't allowed, like certain bank accounts are refusing to like accept transactions from certain people with certain viewpoints. Like eventually you might start seeing cryptocurrency as an alternative way for certain people on that.
I'll start believing in cryptocurrency when you can buy a 12-pack and scratch tickets at the fucking local 7-Eleven.
You're gonna see that soon with the way we're printing money and all the QE that we're doing. Like,
we'll see.
You could actually see a new form of cryptocurrency possibly happening. What about have you heard about the Great Reset?
No, what's that?
It's a World Economic Forum. They did a whole thing about how COVID-19 is exacerbating all the inequality, like the social and economic inequalities, and we need a reset. And it's just like a bunch of like these neoliberal billionaires talking about how they need to do things that are like for the benefit of society. And it's gotten a lot of pushback. It's gotten a lot of like pushback, and it's just like you listen to Alex Jones and all these people, and like this is just hey, this is the new world. This is literally the blueprint for the new world order, and
that shit's hilarious.
I mean, but it's not
Alex
like
Jones is a fucking millionaire. What the fuck has he got to say?
It's funny because I know people who work for them and stuff like that, and I've had a few people from InfoWars on the Pedicab. So InfoWars is actually like they're a small business, and
please.
No, they are. They okay, but
remember when Alex Jones was just a fucking local cable access assless wonder? Alex has no ass. I will say, he's like this fucking tall. He has no ass, literally. I mean, it's really. Never mind. I don't want to go on.
Share how you feel like.
No.
I like. I like the guy. I've met him a couple times. I've had positive interactions with him.
His dad's a good dentist.
I heard that his dad's dentist. I had John Bowden and Harrison Smith come talk to me, and those were good conversations. And they were like reasonable, nice people, and they like listened to me and offered their like viewpoints on a lot of things. But what I'm trying to say though about the whole reset is that because of who is in the World Economic Forum and because of what they were talking about and because of like how stressed everybody is as a result of the pandemic and the fact that nobody knows what's going to happen moving forward, it's really easy for like any conspiracy theorists to say, look, this is the New World Order. They're giving us RFID chips. There's going to be mass surveillance. Like, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep us all poor, clustered in a bunch of megacities. And then I was watching like Economics Explained and reading about it, and it's just the World Economic Forum has like no real power. It's just a bunch of woke billionaires gathering together, discussing things with no real like.
Dude, just stay away. Nobody even knows where the fuck Davos is. Okay.
It's in Switzerland.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you do. Okay. But it's like that fucking town in Syria that nobody knew, or that town in fucking Libya, that people that conservatives were bitching about when Hillary ran for president. Just that shit's just all fucking vapor. It doesn't mean a fucking thing. Just ignore that shit. It's just talk.
But what we're seeing, though, with this pandemic is that you're starting to see a lot of extremely wealthy people. You're starting to see the problem with runaway capitalism. And a lot of conservatives who didn't really understand that are starting to see the problems with runaway capitalism when you see a guy like Bill Gates, a computer nerd with no medical degree, dictating the discourse of public health because he's bought out the WHO and he gives so much money to like all these news organizations and he has a bunch of money invested in all these vaccines, globally. And I'm not trying to like spat out Bill Gates conspiracies, but when a guy like Bill Gates, when a computer nerd who's the CEO of a tech company is the one being the arbiter of public health, and when the experts like Dr. Fauci are on the board of his foundation.
It's not a tech company. I mean, the Gates Foundation is a completely separate.
No, but Microsoft was, so that's what it was.
Yeah, that's how he made his money. But he's no longer. His affiliation with Microsoft at this point is very limited. He's dedicated his billions to philanthropy. That's his job title. His job description. Philanthropy. Okay. Look, I don't want to take a look at what the Gates Foundation has funded in Africa, what it has funded in India, places like that, and that'll tell you everything you need to know. Okay. I mean, it's We talked about the nonprofit industrial complex earlier. At the international level, they're called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And the principle is pretty much exactly the same. None of this threatens the hegemony of international capital. It does not threaten Wall Street, which runs shit. JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, that's who runs shit. Okay? These people are, they're oligarchs. The bottom line is that the people need to come for their fucking money. It's it. It's as simple as that. There is no shortage of money in this world. It's maldistributed. Okay? Why should an Indian farmer, and India has a lot of farming, okay, all of a sudden, because of some asshole President Modi, who's a neoliberal, and uses a conservative version of identity politics, Hindu nationalism, to push through neoliberal policies that benefit multinational corporations. Why should the Gates Foundation be supporting this type of shit? The food revolution, the agricultural revolution that Norman Borlaug brought to India. Okay, has
who
been.
That is.
He was a Texas A&M based agricultural scientist who created a bunch of super crops designed to solve hunger. Remember, this is the 50s and the 60s, okay? A different era, okay? And he created these super crops whereby traditional Indian farmers had to give up their land, and these crops were planted, which increased yields by a factor of 10, multiples of 10 even, okay? Creating more, in the minds of the conventional wisdom at the time, prosperity than ever. Borlaug is from the Midwest, farmer, American, breadbasket type shit. He exported an American mentality into India. Okay, the problem is that it has created a tremendous amount of misery for Indians, but has made a lot of money for the Indian elite and multinational corporations. This is the type of shit that we're talking about. This is the type of stuff that I'm saying when I say it's all connected. You have to identify the enemy. You have to know what it is you're fighting for and what you're fighting against. And you can't lose sight of that. I don't want to get preachy, so I'll just shut up.
No, share, please.
Take a toke.
No. I brought you so that you can be preachy and share how you feel.
Well, that's pretty much how I feel. In Africa, okay, we now have similar phenomena happening. Remember, this world was created through colonialism and imperialism. Okay. Settler colonial societies in countries like the United States, Australia, Israel, and then you're talking about the so-called third world, which is what we're talking about now, which is where a lot of the raw materials are. A good example, for instance, that is now local is Tesla. Tesla needs a lot of lithium for its batteries. Where are some of the largest lithium deposits in the world?
In Africa.
In Africa and in Bolivia. Okay?
Yeah.
What do you think that corporation, in conjunction with the government of the United States, has been doing in those places and to those governments?
You're using slave labor to make the batteries and get the resources.
This is fundamentally not that different from 19th century colonial practice, right? The kind of shit that Gandhi fought against, right? The raw materials, the labor, cheap labor, and other sorts of things. What makes China different is that the Chinese said, yeah, we're going to do that shit too, but it's going to be us in charge, and you're going to pay us first. Not even a finder's fee, And there has been a general increase in living standards in China. A lot of this is discussed in a book that I recommend for you and your viewers and listeners. A gentleman named Jason Hickel, who's an anthropologist in the UK, who wrote a book called The Divide. And, he is big on what he calls degrowth, this mentality, this philosophy that basically says that we cannot continue to exploit ourselves, each other, and especially nature ad infinitum. That there is, in fact, a top, okay? We do not have the capacity to exploit other planets, not in any way that makes sense for most of the human race and for the planet. We have to, and we haven't even explored much of this planet. I mean, most of this planet is deep ocean.
And most of this country is open space.
Yeah. So, we have to come to an understanding that we're in a relationship with each other, and that inequality is essentially the slavery of our time. In the 19th century in the United States, we had that issue that ultimately culminated in a civil war. It became an irreconcilable iron cage. And that's where we're going with inequality.
I think we're definitely heading towards something of that magnitude.
I agree.
But I think it's being perpetuated and exacerbated by corporate media. And there are a lot of very powerful, rich oligarchs who dictate the narrative that's being said in corporate media.
Oh, I completely agree there. They, Roger Ailes understood the power of conflict. But CNN and others did too. It's going to be very interesting to see how they behave in a post-Trump era. Like Twitter, for instance. What is Twitter going to do without having Donald Trump's tweets?
They lost a lot of their stock price went down a lot.
Yeah. Donald Trump was sort of this boogeyman of the boutique liberals, the identity politics liberals who love to hate the actual left. Okay. And they're already placing pressure. I mean, they're basically like, Mark Zuckerberg, you got to shut shit down because it's hurting the people. It's like, the fuck? Why are you not regulating this shit? They should be Twitter and all social media should be run like public utilities. They should be run democratically.
So how do you feel about Section 230 then?
Section 230.
Yeah, like the Constitution. Like I don't really know too much about it, but like Trump and like a lot of people were saying, hey, repeal Section 230, which basically makes it so that the tech companies have to act like they have to be publishers or something like that.
They should be public utilities, not just publishers. I'm a big fan of much of the New Deal, and this was discussed during the New Deal. Look, we've had so much consolidation when 6 companies control everything. That's fucking crazy.
That's crazy.
We should have thousands of places and ways. Like, for instance, what you're doing here, okay? But you don't really have the ability to get your shit out there in a way that even comes close to matching the power of CBS, NBC, or CNN, okay? Or even Fox or Sinclair, okay? It's not even close. Alex Jones, to the extent that you're talking, he's a small businessman who's independent. I respect that, okay? But even if he's completely batshit, which I think he is, okay, I respect his freedom and ability to do what he's doing. But he does not have the right to spew bullshit and to confuse people, okay? There are standards, okay? So it is wrong.
Okay, but there's also stuff that he said that he's been right about.
Like?
He talked about 9/11 2 months before 9/11 happened.
And
in 2001, he was talking about Jeffrey Epstein, like 15, 20 years ago. He talked about he was talking about COVID and how COVID was gonna like spread uncontrollably and really fuck us up, and it was gonna be used as a way to like decimate the economy and create massive civil unrest. And he was talking about that in like January.
Well, the stuff that I liked about him was when he was infiltrating the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
When he was going out into the tall trees in Northern California with a guerrilla camera and actually proving this shit is real. These motherfuckers actually act like this. This crazy ass shit. People in the hood, be like, no, they're not like getting naked around a fucking campfire.
Oh no, they're doing it.
Taking fucking skulls and shit from cemeteries and like putting them on a pedestal and going ooh ah. But they are, man. They're actually doing this shit, which is crazy to me. I mean, you may be like at home or on a corner or something, drinking a 40 or some shit. And, these motherfuckers are like taking that shit to a whole different level. I mean, I like that aspect of Alex Jones. This shit that he's been doing, selling these fake-ass vitamins and all this crazy-ass shit he's been doing lately, and his love affair with Trump. I mean, come on, man. That's a bunch of bullshit. Nobody in their right mind can support that goddamn nonsense.
Well, I started listening to him in like the early mid-2000s when he was criticizing George Bush.
Oh, George Bush deserves criticism.
Yeah, I like that. That's
he's worse than Trump.
Way worse. But that's like he's 100% infinitely worse than Trump. But then with how like Donald Trump did his campaign against Biden, he was calling him like a radical leftist and a socialist and everything like that. And it was just the stupidest thing that you could do because Joe Biden was literally a blue Bush. He was a Democrat. He was George Bush in a blue tie. And if he had just told people that Joe Biden is George Bush in a blue tie, a lot of these Republicans who voted for Trump because they hated George Bush.
Joe Biden, at an international level, if we were speaking here of peer countries of the United States, like countries, most of the countries in the OECD, the UK, France, Germany, Joe Biden would be a fucking right-wing zealot. That's who he would be. Okay? This idea that he's a socialist is laughable on its face. Okay? And Donald Trump is not the brightest guy. You know, he said this shit. But the problem is that we don't have enough critical thinking at an individual level. And then we have the media amplifying this nonsense that Trump is saying. Okay? And then people wonder why shit like last week happened. Okay? That's the problem. The media itself is making so much money, hand over fist, off of Donald Trump. They decided to abdicate what they consider to be their responsibility.
So do you think that any kind of do you think voter fraud occurred at all?
Voter fraud is like a shark attack. That's how fucking rare it is. Okay?
You think so?
Yes. I don't just think so.
But,
that's what the data shows.
Okay, but what about the fact that we're using the same Dominion and Smartmatic voting systems that we use in Venezuela, the Philippines, and all these other countries that don't necessarily?
Why do we? Okay. First of all, voting is fucked up in the United States all over the place. All over the fucking place. First of all, we don't even have a national right to voting. Did you know that?
Explain.
There is no right to vote in the Constitution of the United States. You don't have a right to vote. Did you know that? Show me where in the Constitution it says you have a right to vote. Do we have a right to education in our Constitution? It's not there either. You're not going to find it. Think about that for a second. Most modern constitutions have those rights in there. The Soviet Constitution had that shit in it. And they were the enemy. The Soviet Constitution also had non-discrimination clauses. It was a federal offense under the Soviet Union system to be a racist. A federal offense. Explicitly. Okay? We don't have these things in the United States. Our elections are a fucking circus. Why the fuck do we have national elections that take a year plus and cost $1 billion plus? That is insanity. In the UK, elections are much more civilized. They aren't run in this crazy ass fashion.
Look at the Prime Minister of the UK is
well,
right.
Okay. Let's set him aside. You fucking idiot. Okay. All right. But our entire system is completely busted from the word go. Okay. We should nationalize our elections. We should establish a national standard for national elections. Government should run the entire fucking thing from front to back. That is the assurance we require that our election system will be free and fair. We should abolish the Electoral College and other stupid shit like that.
I don't know about that, though, because the Electoral College gives smaller states and other less populated states more of a voice, and people in urban areas have a different concerns than people in rural areas.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I'm serious about that.
How the fuck can you defend something like the goddamn Electoral College? A goddamn archaic bunch of bullshit that a bunch of white men instituted to appease the fucking slave states.
Hold on, let me explain.
The fuck is wrong with you?
Wait. All right. Let me explain my perspective on this. And it's because when a bunch of when you overly crowd cities, you'll have a bunch of corporate Democrats and ultra neoliberal oligarchs that will utilize progressive policies and dictate these neoliberal platitudes to get people to vote against their own self-interest. And you look at what happened in Austin with the whole Prop J thing and the whole don't Trump Austin and all that stuff on a smaller scale. And you could start. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. You're gonna get a group of people. You'll be creating a system where
we will have a system where people who fucking vote, their votes will be counted. That's fucking right. That's what we're gonna have. We have fucking president now who didn't win the popular vote in 2016 and 2020. And he's appointed a huge chunk of the federal judiciary. What the fuck? Do you believe in democracy or not? Stop cock blocking democracy. Okay? We should get rid of that fucking archaic system and we should nationalize shit. Okay? We should establish a guarantee with an affirmative amendment to the Constitution to free, fair elections. One person, one vote. Okay? Fucking Wyoming is a fucking speck. Nobody fucking lives there.
They have more electoral votes per person.
They have 2 senators. Don't even get me started on the Senate. Why do they have fucking 2 senators? Fucking Travis County has more fucking people than Wyoming. I mean, come on. Give me a break. Come on. You know,
but like a lot of people in these areas, I'm just pushing back, man. A lot of people in those areas already feel like marginalized and like they're not being listened to and they're like being completely discounted. And I feel like you start doing shit like that, it'll just create more of this type of extremism that we're dealing with.
I don't think so. I mean, if we do some of the things that I've advocated in our conversation, okay, I'm certainly a believer in our federal system of governance in other areas. Okay, we need to democratize our political economy. Okay, and we need to make sure that people who live in rural areas are taken care of and other sorts of things. But we've completely romanticized places like this. Who the fuck grows our food? Is it a small family farmer or rancher in Wyoming? No, it's fucking agribusiness.
You know, Bill Gates
fucking food lots and feedlots and shit.
Bill Gates owns 240,000 acres of.
Well, these motherfuckers have their own private ranches where they grow their own grass-fed and grass-finished beef and buffalo and shit.
And then everyone else gets GMOs and all that.
That's right. And maybe some of it he'll serve to his friends and shit. Ted Turner and his fucking Montana ranch does the same goddamn thing. You know, it all comes back to the same place: inequality. Okay, if we make our society more equal, then you know we're not going to have these sort of hypothetical issues that you're talking about. The framers of the Constitution were concerned about making sure that smaller states. Well, that's not true. They really did establish the Electoral College to minimize democracy and the ability of certain people to be able to run the government. But they did create an upper chamber of Congress, whereby each state would have 2 people. Both of those things, the Senate and the Electoral College, is where a lot of the contention lies, where a lot of the problems are. We need reforms in those areas.
Sure, but we should be doing like the reforms that you're talking about need to be done first before we start abolishing the Electoral College.
No, Electoral College needs to be fucking chopped up with a goddamn meat cleaver, okay? It needs to go away. Full stop. It needs to completely be abolished. We need to have free, fair national elections. None of these fucking private actors. No fucking individual states running shit. Your state elections, your local elections, have at it. Fucking do whatever the hell you want. National elections for national office should be run in a national, free and fair way.
Hey, what do you think about what happened with the council races before we wrap up?
Which ones?
Well, D6 specifically, but we'll talk about the other ones.
Well, I'm glad Jimmy Flanagan's gone. Oh my God, that guy's a piece of work. He's the kind of guy, who literally would, suck his own dick if he could. That's how much he loves himself. Okay, he's just, I'm glad he's gone. I hope he stays out of politics. I hope he stays out of public life.
Isn't he like now the new CEO of like the Austin Convention Center or some shit like? Yeah.
He continues to live off the taxpayer dole because he knows he can't make it as a private businessman. He's a fraud. He was a fraud from the word go. And that's actually true with a lot of these swamp creatures in City Hall. Many of them are frauds. If you look beneath the hood, you would see there isn't a whole lot there.
I think Leslie Poole's good.
Oh, yeah, I like Leslie Poole.
Leslie Poole's good. She led the lawsuit about the Permian pipeline.
Well, I think, we have good people on our city council.
I think Alter's okay.
It's just Flanagan wasn't one of them.
I think Allison Alter, like a lot of these like conservatives that I'm like friends with and follow that like me on Twitter are starting to not like Alter, but I think Alter's actually like has integrity and decency and she does her best.
Yes.
I think I think that's Mackenzie. I think Mackenzie's pretty cool. Like I
She's
like
better
Mackenzie.
than Flanagan.
Yeah, I mean Mackenzie. When I talk to her, she'll respond to my text messages.
Absolutely.
And she actually went on my Pedicab and talked to me, and that's pretty cool for somebody who was running for city council at the time when I was episode 8 to come and talk.
When it comes to public service and constituent service, she is the anti-Pio. Literally, Pio Renteria only talks to people that he likes.
Yeah.
That's the kind of bubble. He's like a hack. He reminds me of a Chicago Daily Machine Democratic Party hack. That is exactly the job description he fits. That's why he has that position. That's why so much real estate development is targeted towards his district. I mean, it's sad. It's profoundly sad when you compare the needs of that district with the leadership that they have in City Hall.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
And it's unfortunate. It didn't have to be that way, but that's
it is what it is. But and that's another thing with Flanagan is that like he had a card-carrying Marxist who was managing his campaign. And it's
really?
Jacob Aronowitz was like a full-blown like
was he?
DSA. Yeah, Jacob Aronowitz was
I
a
don't
full-blown like communist Marxist.
Was he?
Yeah.
Well, how do you know that? I don't
Because
know
I
that.
know him. I've hung out with him before. I was in that like there was like the
Well,
political.
just because you're a member of DSA doesn't mean
No, because on his Twitter profile it says vulgar Marxist on his Twitter bio.
Well, a vulgar Marxist, just to be fair, a vulgar Marxist is somebody who has their own particular interpretation of Marx that deviates from orthodoxy. Okay, there actually in Marxist thought is a definition of vulgar Marxism. Look it up. I'm sure you can find it on Wikipedia.
Sure, I'd love to. That'll be my homework for today is to find out. But either way, you had like someone who openly identified themselves as a communist, supporting like one of the most corporate neoliberal, developer-friendly candidates in the city of Austin, and it was just like. You know, if somebody who was like a full-blown card-carrying like communist or socialist was working on your campaign, it's like consistent, right? But like
no, because I'm not a communist.
Okay.
Are you fucking kidding me? I'm not a goddamn communist. Fuck, don't be putting words in my mouth. Fuck that. No. I am not a communist. Okay. I am a Willy Brandt social democrat. Okay. A Rexford Tugwell social democrat. Look these names up.
Okay. All right.
But both of these men were not communists. Okay, they were accused of being communists. Like Rexford Tugwell, a New Deal official and a member of Roosevelt's Brains Trust, was called Rex the Red. That was his nickname. The corporate media anointed him with that name, but that's not what he was about.
Yeah. All right. Well, good to know. I'm glad we clarified that. I guess before we wrap up, what do you think about the D2 stuff? What happened with District 2, and how do you feel about Vanessa Fuentes?
Well, I met with Vanessa. I think she'll be better than Delia Garza. I think, I'm looking forward because Delia Garza to me is part of this
establishing, yeah,
the slush. So let's see how she does. That district has significant challenges that are similar to District 3. I certainly hope that we'll be able to work together on some things, let's see how this 2021 goes.
Her like staff, her staff was actually a lot cooler than I thought that they were going to be when I first her husband was really cool. Like I had one of her like volunteers who was like a pretty influential business person like in Cedar Park or whatever. Come talk to me, and she was like one of the nicest people ever. So like. I actually am pretty surprised, and I'm really glad that David got wrecked also.
Well, that was a surprise.
Like that guy got wrecked.
I was surprised by that. Pio said he was going to hire him back. I don't know if he's done that. I don't tune in to anything Pio-ish because he doesn't give a shit. So I don't give a shit. It
also shows that like Pio sold everybody up the river, and they knew, and they were like, I'm not voting for this motherfucker.
Well, Chin Chan Chan is. So it was so transparent that he was an opportunist.
An empty suit.
He kind of reminded me of Greg Kassar in that way. Sort of a less intelligent version of Greg Kassar. That is not what our districts require. They require people who have bona fide leadership skills, who work for the people. You know what I mean? And by that I mean not just the rich, not just real estate developers, but for that single mom who cleans hotel rooms, okay, and is wondering how she's going to be able to put food on the table. That's who these people should be serving, okay? But they don't, and it's sad.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly thought that it was going to go to a runoff with Casey and Vanessa. I was actually thinking that was.
I'd hope Casey would do better. I was on the board of Community Not Commodity with Casey.
Yeah, you wrote the People's Plan. Both of y'all did that. Yeah.
Yeah, we did, and he participated in that, and I like Casey. I like him a lot. I hope he stays in public life. I think he needs to serve on a few boards and commissions, learn how City Hall, learn the basics of public policy, have the capacity to have intelligent conversations about public policy. It's one thing to have feelings and opinions, but in order to exercise public judgment, you also have to have a demonstrated record of public responsibility, of discharging that type of responsibility and what it means. As a former naval officer, I feel like I had that. That's what I articulated when I ran for the council. I was rejected, but that's fine. I've got a lot of things going on that are way beyond this city at an international level. So for me, it's like, okay, great. But, he's from here. He's retired from the game, no No more pugilism for him.
Yeah.
So that's good. Now we can, and he's for a boxer in particular, he's very educated.
Well, and he's also a really good boxer. I was watching some of his fights on YouTube, and I was like, holy shit, this guy could have been like
Well, Bob Arum, when you're fighting
on Showtime and stuff.
Yeah, that's serious. Yeah, that's pretty serious. So, and we have a tradition of that. Interestingly enough.
Yeah, James Kirkland, like they've had a lot of really good fighters.
His
coming
trainer,
up.
who is one of the greatest,
and Wolf
was one of the greatest boxers, male or female, most devastating right hand I've ever seen. Oh my God! I mean, she had much respect for Ann Wolf, much respect. Yeah.
All right, I think we're about to wrap up. We've been here probably over an hour. Fred, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. How could we get a hold of you?
Thank you, my man.
Of course. Boom, we're elbow bumping. You got to be safe from this pandemic.
Go to fredmcgee.com. Go to montopolis.org, or just put my name into Google. All kinds of use DuckDuckGo because Google tracks you, or some other non-tracking search site, and you'll see my stuff come up. I've been around long enough, done enough stuff.
Hey, Mackenzie says hi, by the way. I just got a message from her. You see, Mackenzie? Yeah, she even responds. See, look, she responds to my proof that she responds.
Is she watching right now?
Yeah, she's like, is she really smoking a cigar? I guess she is watching. Yeah. So.
All right, Mackenzie, that's right.
So we're saying we're glad you got the W. I think she's gonna. I think the people are gonna be listened to a lot more in City Hall now that everything is.
I hope so. I think I told her that I thought Don Zimmerman. I didn't agree with him politically at all. I did appreciate though his willingness to buck the conventional wisdom and to ask actual why questions of the city staff.
Yeah, we needed sending voices. It was like
without question.
It was just a big circle jerk like the past 2 years. So
absolutely,
it's a good thing that we got to sending voices. And
we need to. We have under our current council manager system, essentially palace eunuchs. There's advantages to having a professional staff, led by a city manager, but there are also disadvantages. Okay. The problem is that you have what you just described as a circle jerk. You have groupthink.
Yeah.
Okay. And we need to break that groupthink if we're going to make progress as a city.
And that strong mayor thing is a bunch of bullshit, too, because it's just going to make it so that these developers are going to just control one person. But anyway, Fred, thank you so much for coming on.
All right. We'll leave it there. All right, man. Sounds good. Thanks for watching.